Good afternoon and welcome back to Covered and Crowned. It's your girl Crystal, and I have my really good sister Jarkeshia here to share with you guys today. I'm super excited as we're coming towards the end of the year. It's definitely time to clean house and to reconcile some things as we prepare for the new year. And what better way to do that by talking about healing and forgiveness. So, Jarkesha, if you just want to tell the people about yourself a little bit.
Oh yes, as she said, I'm Jarkeshia McGahee. I am a podcast host of Encouragement Forward. This is where Crystal and I actually met. I interviewed her a little while ago, and also I'm a mother. I have a almost 4 year old that keeps me busy, and I have two bonus daughters. And my husband and I have been married for 5 years. I just realized actually on the um the 17th of this month we'll be together actually 6 years. So I was like, wow, time really flew by. But I also have Rays of Sunshine Jam. That's what I kind of go by, or Coach Sunshine Jam. I have encouragement coaching, which I'm actually putting on pause for a moment. I'm really trying to focus on what I feel that God is calling me to do, and keep moving forward with the podcast, as well as the next big adventure, which will be a summit that'll come out in March of next year. So I really want to take time, and I'm actually like, okay, doing something I don't normally do and taking a break and just saying, you know what, let me really get focused and do what God is calling me to do. And I'm seeing so many lives been touched with the podcast. So, and Crystal can tell you just from her interviewing and things we talk about, like it really is God's doing. There's nothing, not, we're there telling the story, but He's having us say what He wants us to say. And I'm in Alabama, so if y'all hear my little slang when I talk, just let you know now I'm in Alabama. So
I'm excited. I listen, I'm just finding out about this summit. So hopefully we'll hear more so that we can definitely support you. Um Now, one thing that we talked about when I was on her podcast was just daughters and fathers and what that relationship looked like, how there were points of disappointment and how we try to navigate on our own and then also with God to really heal and to forgive and move on to be the women that He's called us to be now. And so, Jarkesha, I would love for you just to take us back to your relationship with your father. What did that look like, and how did you get into a space where healing was even needed or forgiveness was needed?
well, one of the things I can say, like, we don't normally talk about, say, and especially in the African American community, about like parental hurt. And it could be from having father hurt, mother hurt. It could be other people in your family. It could be your own siblings. It could be the people that you really don't expect to, like, I guess they hurt you. That can
Mhm.
happen. And it's one of those things we should talk more about, actually, because we're not the only ones who either gone through it or going through it and need that guidance. So what I can say, it started back when I was younger. It used to always be just we would, of course, my mom and dad got divorced when I found out later, a year and a half old. I always thought I was two, but then somehow I saw the actual date, and I was like, oh, I was only a year and a half old when they got divorced. And so it used to be, of course, most times you go see your parent every other weekend, and so it would just be my brother and I, because I have a brother that's 7 years older than me, and I have four other siblings besides him. Well, no, I'm supposed to say three other siblings besides him, but he and I are the only ones that had the same mom and dad. And so my dad would get us every other weekend. We would go to my dad's. It would just be the three of us. It was always so fun, and we all slept in the same bed. I do remember that much of it. And I can remember the bed and like us sleeping in the same bed. And I was like, oh, okay. And then out of nowhere, and I love her. My dad came up, came my stepmom came out of nowhere,
Mm.
and I remember like everything changed.
Mhm.
Everything was so different. And also during this time, my dad had started to study for being a minister. And so a lot changed within that instant. I remember my dad being the one that was, we all sitting in there, he smoking cigarettes, in the in the bedroom or in the house. To all of a sudden, none of that was happening anymore. It went to, and not only was it just my stepmom that came, she brought her son with her. Now,
Mm.
mind you, her son is, which I call my little brother now, because he's always called me his big sister. He's exactly a year under me. Like
Mm.
I just turned 35, and next month he'll be 34. So you could just imagine, like, who are you? Like, where did you come from? Where is all of this
Mhm.
coming from? and we would still go see my dad, but then it included like we may go be with them, and it was like we all had our own room at my dad's house. My brother had his room, and I had my room, and so I got to keep my room, but it was still the interesting fact that like my brother had stopped coming, so it was just me. As long as I had my brother, I was okay. I felt like okay, I still feel like I'm at home. But then my
Mm,
little brother would come, and I love him dearly, and he's finally answered his calling. But he used to be this little preacher that would just preach all the time. He was always on. You'd be like, "Will you please hush?" Like I couldn't stand him. Like I tried to beat him up, and he probably don't remember this, but I did. I used to push him on the bed and be trying to beat him up and stuff. And but everything kind of changed. And so it was like then I'm living in two different worlds. Now my
mm,
dad and my stepmom got married when I was 5. And so I do remember getting ready for the wedding, being there, and I know my mom dropped me off, got my hair done, and then somebody else brought me home that evening after that night, of the wedding. So everything kind of changed. We all did live in that same house, so the house was still the same that my mom and my dad lived in. But then it was kind of like my brother lost his room because he wasn't there anymore, and I still had my room. But it was kind of like getting used to my stepmom. And for a minute, I blamed her to be like, I didn't care much for her, to be honest. It was like, who are you? You come in, you like changed everything. And it was like,
mhm,
I just had to adapt to it. And mind you, I'm like 5, 6 years old. So my world just completely changed. And I'm like, well, what do I do? How to adjust to this? So one of the things was like, my dad, as I said, as you know, most people when they're walking into ministry, things change. Some of the old habits are not there anymore. You start doing something new, so it became a whole different thing. Like it got used to us being like, yeah, after church, we'll go over to my great grandma's house and check, see them visit after church and all. But it was just different. It was like I was so used to being under my daddy, and
mm.
I couldn't be under my daddy anymore like I was. It was like right up on because now he had a wife. So she come first and then I came. So it became I got older and we used to always ask my dad for stuff and we used to hear no a lot. So it kind of got to that point of, you know what, I'm just not gonna ask or whatever. Every
Mm,
time I ask, this happens. And for me, it was just different. Like I was okay with doing certain things at my mom's house, but I couldn't do the things at my dad's house. Like certain things we couldn't watch on TV because one, yes, I could have been a certain age, but because my little brother wasn't, we couldn't watch it. Everything had to be censored. Everything had to be looked over before we could watch it. And it was just like, wow. And so my stepmom always tried to get close to me and wanted me to like be her daughter, call her mom. And I think I did that for a little while and then it was just like, I'm not doing it. That's Barbara. I call her, Barbara. So but it was just like it still wasn't the same. So then they finally like moved from that house and it became one of those like my mom always made it where my dad had access to my brother and I. He never had to go through her. We always had our own phone line. So I think I became to understand stuff a little bit more when I was about 7 or 8. And my dad didn't call us. Yes, he got me every other weekend and I got to be with them, but it still wasn't the same. And my dad was one of those ones that, I'm not just gonna reach out and call you and check on you kind of person. It's more like you reach out to me, or otherwise, then And growing up, I got to that point where it was like, what, my dad is only doing what he has to do by law. It wasn't
Mm,
so much of having that relationship with him and being like, okay, well, we got the checks and we will go get whatever, but it still wasn't like nothing like the same. So for a while, I still, like I said, never really cared as much for my stepmom and little brother. And I think as I got older and start understanding things more, I used to blame a lot on my dad, especially like I was heavy set. So nobody wasn't interested in me back then. I was the little chunky little girl in like middle school, elementary school. And so when I finally got to like almost going to high school, I lost weight. And so of course young men start paying you attention and you're like, oh, okay. And
right.
so people all in your ear and like, okay, I wasn't getting like, this kind of attention. Like I might have had one or two boyfriends and like what does it say in not even high school, in like middle school, but one of them I kept hidden because I just didn't feel right about him. I actually, to be honest, I thought he was like dirty, and I was like, not dirty and like mean dirty, like dirty as in like not clean dirty. And
Mm,
so and then just being like promiscuous. And when I finally get to that point of, exploring things, and then got to high school, lost weight, dating people way above my age, and
Mhm.
um, it became one of those. I always blamed everything on my daddy. Like, it's my fault. He ain't been in the picture like he should, and
Mm.
I don't really know what the love is and all these things. And so I did. I used to just blame everything. It's my daddy's fault. It's all his fault. That he hadn't been around really, in the picture no more than me seeing him every other weekend. But what changed was I got older, and I started being like, no. It was like, I think it was when I'm more so when I got before I went to college. And it was something that hit me that's been like, you know what? One of the things that hurt me the most in high school was I was willing to go be with my dad and be with him on the weekends still, even though by law I didn't have to anymore. I had a choice. But I would make plans to say, okay, I'm gonna go. And then I may change my mind, like, no, I ain't coming this weekend. I'm not gonna come. So it got to this one point we got in like a little argument. And I remember it was my cousin's 16th birthday. And I had told my dad I was gonna come with him, and then I found out about her sleepover, and I'm like, no, I'm going to her party. And so I called him to let him know, like, I'm not coming. And so my dad was like, no, you are coming. I'm like, no, I'm not. He was like, yes, you are. You keep changing and keep changing plans. And I'm like,
Mm.
I'm not coming. And so I was like, yeah, whatever. So I told my mom what was said, and my mom I told him I was gonna be at a basketball game prior to, because I used to go. We were going to the game first before her party or stuff. And my dad showed up before the game even started, so I wouldn't even have got to watch
Wow.
the game. And I wasn't there though, because I told my mom, I told him I wasn't coming and I'm not going. And so he and my nephew couldn't have been no more than maybe two. He's 23 now, but he was like, Mima, I want to go in and watch the game. My dad saw my mom and what did it say, the lobby of the gym, and he was like, she's like, where is she? My mom was like, she's not here. And he was like, well, she said, well, she made it sound like you tried to demand her to do something. And he was like, you're not going to get anywhere with demanding her. That's not going to work.
Mm.
She's like, she's not a child anymore. He said, well, she's not grown either. I done bought these tickets for this and that. My mom was like, well, oh, well. And then he left. And then
Mm.
she later told me that she saw him. But even before that, I was in the band in high school. And I was, like I said, willing to go with my dad. But I let them know, like, hey, you have to come pick me up after the game because I had to perform. I was in the band. My dad knows about that. He was in the band in high school and in college. Well, they never made the effort to come get me afterwards.
Mm.
So I was just like, you know what? Oh, well. And like I said, I think it was more so what kind of made a flip switch was going into college, growing up, and God really working within me. When my granddaddy died, my mom's dad died a week before finals, my first semester of college. And so it was like that turned a lot of things around where I had to sit there and be like, you know what? I got to take responsibility of my own actions. Just because this guy treated me this way and I fell for his lies and all like that, I can't blame all that on my dad. Like, I got to own up to my own mistakes and the things I'm doing and stop blaming other people for it. And so even during that time, I went and got I was supposed to get like submerged baptized when I was little, but it was like that little girl before me went down. She came out hooping and hollering. I was like, I am not going down there. I remember I was like 4. I was like, I'm not doing it. But I do remember, like, I got, because it was in the AME Zion Church. I did get like in college, I got the sprinkle, basically, to say, not
Mm.
like a christening, but they have 3 ways you could get baptized. So I did do that, and I let my dad know. Like, that even had got to that point where I let him know, like, hey, this is what I'm gonna do. And he asked me, do you understand what you're doing? And I said yes, and he was like, okay, that's good. He wasn't gonna be there, but we had that point of at least we were communicating somewhat.
Mm.
And I do remember one time I wrote my dad a letter, and I don't remember if I was in high school going into college or what, but I wrote him a letter, and that's what the thing that sparked um our journey to healing and forgiveness. Because I wrote a letter and I asked him, like, why is it that I could do this here, why I couldn't do that. I didn't ask him more details about him going to jail. I knew he had been to jail before. I knew that once upon a time he had I wasn't even thought of in the world. I do know he had hit my mom before, and I didn't get to ask questions, but I did ask as much, like, why is it that when I came to your house, I could only do this, and when I was at home, I can only do that, and we sat down and we had a talk. I said, I really want to talk to you. And we had a conversation. He was just like, we just don't do those things in this household. Like, watch it. Like, I could be 13, but we couldn't watch a PG-13 movie because my little brother was 12. And he was
Mm-hmm.
just like, there are just certain things they didn't do. Like, I remember I got reprimanded for singing at the table. And my dad was like, we don't do that. I'm like, oh, okay. We were eating dinner or something. I was just, singing whatever the song. And so it was just learning to live with those two lifestyles, but being able to open that door to communication. So,
Mm-hmm.
my dad still kept continuing to, pay for child support throughout college. And then it came to a point where it was like, okay, I'm 21. And it was like that. I think that's when it all stopped. And then my dad was like, I kept paying more than I had to. I could have stopped a long time ago. I'm like, well, that ain't what my mama said, but I left that alone. And it got to a point where I asked him, like, well, can you at least, if I need, call you and say, hey, because my mom wanted to get me a car. This is one time I do remember my feelings were a little bit hurt. My mom wanted to get me a car when I graduated from, it was either high school or college. I think it might not have been college. Anyways, I think it was high school. And my dad was like, no, I can't do it. I already have my name on enough stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, oh, okay then. So then it became, well, could you at least, like, if I call and say, hey, I might need something, could you try to help me that way or something? And he was
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, we'll see how, that goes. Because like I said, yeah, it was college because it was right after child support stopped. And my mom wanted him to secure the car and then she would pay the payments on it. But what got me that hurt me some was my dad told me no, but then he turned around and my little brother got a new car. And it was like, oh, so y'all can't get me no car, but
Mm-hmm.
you get him a car. And then it was like, okay, that's all right. I understand, no problem. So I always kind of did feel like I was like, sometimes like, well, this is what it is. And so within time, like I said, that kind of dampened our relationship just a little bit too. And as time went on, it would be like sometimes just calling dad and checking on. And then what really helped is my relationship with God. The closer I got to God, the more I understood forgiveness and letting go of things and being like, I have to forgive for myself, not for him, not
Mm-hmm.
for my dad, nobody else. I have to forgive for me because God's going to look at how I'm responding to how somebody is treating me. He's
Yeah.
not worried about what they're doing to me. He's worried about how am I going to respond to how they're treating me. So when I got into closer into the church, I had moved back home my mom at one point, and I used to always say a whole lot of things like my dad ain't gonna walk me down the aisle. My dad is not gonna give me away. I'm not doing no father daughter dance. I had all these
Mm-hmm.
thoughts. That's just how mad I was with my dad over the years. And I remember that I don't remember which church I was at. All I know is that, like I said, the closer I got to God, knew more about Him, the more it was like I gotta reconcile this relationship. I gotta, do my part. My dad is not gonna be one to reach out to me, and I think
Mm-hmm.
I learned that more so too with his mom, my grandma, because my grandma always did look for us to contact her. She went off on
Mm-hmm.
me one time because I hadn't been to see her, come see her, and I came by, and she was like, "Don't think I'm gonna be easy on you just because you got this young man here or whatever." And I'm saying here, like, really, like you could have called me too. You never made the effort to call me. So I kind of had to get to that point of understanding, like you learn behaviors to say,
Yeah.
like if you grew up a certain way. My dad was an only child. He grew up basically with his mom. So if I'm seeing what he's doing, what she does, and understand now, okay, that's why he does it and had to understand and realize my dad wasn't gonna be the one reaching out to me, checking up on me, and seeing like how I'm doing. But I do remember that before all that, before I go to that part, I'm sorry, my stories, things are coming to me. So,
No, it's
but
okay. I want to take you back real quick though. Because I think at least from what I'm hearing, it's like a building was being built. You know what I
hmm
mean? Like it wasn't just one thing happened and then everything fell apart. It really was kind of something that was happening over time through through some inconsistencies in your communication and togetherness, and then with things changing. So I want to just take you all the way back just a little bit to where you were saying, you had this cadence with him and your brother where you guys would be over there, we would sleep together. There was a
Mhm.
rhythm there. And then when this woman comes along, now there's this sharp turn. And I just want to park there for a second because I think sometimes as adults, now that we're adults and we have kids, we expect them to just handle things as if we would. We expect them to handle things with the maturity level and understanding of an adult, not recognizing this is a moment where I have to nurture them a little bit more. Um, and so I know that was super young, but I would like you just to kind of, if you can, talk about how that exchange of here's this consistent bond, here's this consistent rhythm with dad, here's this change, and how that affected realistically the future changes that came. Because I'm sure that in some of those conversations later in middle school, like you said, when you started dating and or in high school, or even when more changes came, some of those things were probably resonating in your head, the fact that things changed when she came along, or whatever. So talk to us about just kind of, if you can remember, how that changed. Like, what did you feel in those moments about him, and what did it cause you to feel about yourself?
One of the things I remember, and it's funny because I'm very visual, so I do remember like being in the room beating on my little brother. Sometimes I guess is one of the things I do remember the most. But I do remember like nothing was ever how to say. I think we met her one time at church before the next thing I know, oh y'all about to get married.
Mm,
So I do remember us going to church one night, and and I don't think I understood like to the extent of like who she really was or what is this, but it was like everything just changed. Like I said, we went from our norm to here it is like, okay, who is this lady? Why is she here? And it was never sat down with us to be
mm,
like, for what I remember, I don't ever remember being sat down and be like, hey, I'm dating somebody and I want you to meet her. I think the way that we first met was at church. And I guess they felt that was the safest place to,
probably.
introduce him to to his two kids. So I don't remember the first real reaction. I think it was at church, but it was still like, okay, this is somebody. I never put it together like, oh, this is somebody my daddy's dating. I put
Mm,
it together like, oh, okay, this is somebody we meet at church. And I don't ever recall sitting down and having a conversation, being like, okay, things are going to change and all this is going to happen. I think everything just kind of happened within an instant. It was more like, okay, here she is. Then I remember as far as my dad is going to marry her.
mm,
And I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm like, like, well, what is, like not really understanding. Even at the wedding, I'm dragging them down the aisle. I don't even
mm,
know what my role was, but I had my little brother and his cousin, one on each side, and they still make fun of me, and it's on camera. When I had both of them, they were back there playing, and it was time for us to go. And I grabbed one on each side, and I dragged them down the aisle. Basically, is what everybody said, and they just loved it. It was so cute. But I don't really remember much else between that except for like I said, it changed. My brother, I don't think he came as much because one, like I told you, my little brother was a little pastor back then, where his mom was a pastor also. So when you
mm,
met her, you already knew why he was the way he was, because she was always one that was always on and preaching and talking and doing, and we don't do this, you don't say that, you can't do this, you can't do that. And so it was a lot of rules. And it was kind of like, well, dog, everything, like I said, it was just we adjusted. I guess is what happened. We just accepted, and if we did complain or anything, we did it with my mom. I don't remember ever really having a conversation with my dad. I don't remember him ever leaving the door open to have
mm,
conversations about it. It was kind of like this was his decision, and this is what we have to deal with. This is what he decided to do. I don't think we really had a say, period, in it. It was more like this is what I saw, this is what I want, and this is what I'm going to get. So I don't really remember us having any kind of discussion. So it was just like, okay, then this is how it's gonna go. And like I said, next thing I know, yeah, they got married, but that's still, being young like that, that didn't click to me like nothing much about it really. And then she moved in, and then it was like, oh, and then it was like I came back to the house and everything was different
mm,
because, like I told you, I still had my little room, Without my, I still remember. I think I had a unicorn or My Little Pony something sheet on it, but I had my little room, and she used to always not. Don't get me wrong, my stepmom always tried to have this relationship with me. She thought I would be the daughter she never had. She always tried to work things out. I just wasn't receptive at first because I
Mhm.
felt like you took my daddy, you messed everything up.
Mhm.
Like I didn't want nothing to really do with you. I
There
didn't
it
want to have
is.
no nothing, to do with you. And it was like you made everything change, and here we
Mhm.
are. We're doing certain things. My dad changed. That was the thing.
Mhm.
He even changed. And I understood part, not then, I understand now, but
Mhm.
he changed. It went from you were a smoker to you stopped smoking. To we would all be in the bed, like daddy be in his tighty whities and his white beaters, and all of us be in the same bed sleep. So all of a sudden I had to get kicked out of the bed. Like,
Mm.
it was just like me at a young age, everything just changed. And I just
Yeah.
had to deal with it. And like I said, the best thing I guess I thought then was just to blame stuff on him when people treated me wrong. Like I associated anything negative more
Mhm.
so with, oh, it's my daddy's fault that I act like this is my daddy fault that I'm acting out. It's my daddy fault that I'm, snappy. It's all his fault. It's all his fault. And it was like in reality, no, it was just me being a growing up and being a bratty little kid at the time. But for me, it felt like that. It was like it's your fault. You made this happen. You made all this happen. I can't. I didn't want to go over there as much because I knew how it was gonna be, but I had no choice but to go. I mean, we sat there on Sundays watching the Bible story tapes. Like my little brother had a whole closet full of VHS tapes, and he got to go in there and pick them out. We watched Rocky so many times. He still love Rocky, and I love him now. Back then it was like, okay, stand you. I mean, like as far as my little brother, but we would go in there. He go in the closet. He had a whole little closet door full of VHSs, and he would pick out whichever one, and we had to sit there and we be watching them before church. So it was just kind of like a different world for me because my mom would let me watch, not saying like I'm watching TVMA or
Mhm.
NC-17, whatever it was back then, but I mean, I could watch some things that may have had a cuss word slip up somewhere in there or something like that. But for me to go there, it was like I had to be two different people. I had to be this one person with my mom and another person with my dad. My dad, I was like, yes, sir. Uh-huh. We got fussed at because we fell asleep in the back of the church one time on the back pew. So, it was a whole different everything. And I know like my dad, but then I had to think about my dad didn't have, I should say didn't, because he's in the past now, didn't have a strong relationship with any of us. And I was one of those that I'm the softie of the bunch for that. I just really found that out more. I'm non-confrontational. I don't like confrontation. I don't like fussing and arguing. But it became one of those things of, as you get older, you see things differently. Even now, us as adults, we hear music differently than we used to. Like some of the
Yeah.
songs we used to be singing back in the day, we'd be like, "Oh
Mhm.
my goodness, I was singing about that! Like I didn't know that! Like oh my gosh!"
Listen,
And
yes.
so now having adult ears and having, your
Yes.
relationship with Christ really makes a difference for him to work within you to see things. And I still remember somewhere between, I think it was high school. Now, mind y'all, my birthday's October the 1st. My dad's birthday is October the 5th.
No.
Well, one year my dad forgot my birthday, and that hurt because he remembered my brother's birthday that was all the way in July.
Mm.
Got my birthday that was 4 days before yours. And one day we had to have a conversation. I told him it hurt. I said, how are you gonna forget my birthday? You forgot my birthday. My birthday's 4 days before yours, but you remember my brother's birthday. And do you know last year, I might get teary eyed saying this because I did it when I told him last year, my dad, it's one of those things you kind of know who hasn't said happy birthday to you that will really
Mhm.
matter if they have said happy birthday to you.
Mhm.
And so, like, I knew, like, this year, I knew one of my brothers hadn't told me happy birthday yet. So I was like, I was waiting on your call. But last year, my dad did not tell me happy birthday on my birthday, and I knew that. And I was just like, I don't think I thought much about it. It was like, oh, okay. My dad went out of his way that next morning
Mm.
to make sure he sent me a text message and told me, baby, I did not forget your birthday. He said his phone was left in the car and it was getting serviced. He's like, I did not forget your birthday. He wanted me to know because he remembered how bad it hurt me
Mm-hmm.
before when he forgot my birthday. One of the things I could say for the reconciliation and healing with us was having to have that line of communication
Mm-hmm.
to be able to talk, to be able to ask questions, to be able to understand some things I will never know the answer to with our conversations, and to see the depth of how far to go. Because when you got somebody who's kind of more private, and it's kind of like, well, I don't know how to approach my dad with this question or how to ask about certain things. I don't know how he's going to respond to me because we never had that close knit father daughter relationship. Yes, you can look
Mm-hmm.
at my baby pictures and see I'm sitting in his lap and I'm all like this. And everybody's, I know most girls are daddy's girls, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't have, I'm one of those when it came time to buy a Father's Day card, I'm sitting here like, no, can't get that. That ain't true. Okay. No, can't get that. That's too this too, having to really sometimes buy the generic Happy
Mm-hmm.
Father's Day card because all the other ones are like, thank you for teaching me this and doing this with me and doing, and that wasn't true because I didn't have all of that. And I
Right.
just had my mom and whoever that she might have been dating at the time. The one person that was like a dad to me was the guy she was engaged to that passed away. He had a massive heart attack. And he taught me how to iron. He made me stop being up under my mama so much. He basically made me grow up. He taught me how to ride my bike. He did all these things with me. And then he was more like our dad. Even when he passed, my brother cried, like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my goodness, because he took time with us and he gave us something we didn't have. Yes, we saw our dad every other weekend, but then
Yeah.
my brother didn't have that relationship with my dad. And I've always been one of those people. I want to know my family. I want to get to know, like, I wanted to know my siblings. I was
Mm-hmm.
told at one time my dad didn't have contact with my oldest brother and my sister. And then later find out my sister called when I was visiting one time. I was that one that once I could drive and knew where to go, I wanted to go visit different people sometimes, depending upon the relationship at that time. And depending upon how I was treated, determined if I went back to go back and
Mm-hmm.
see people. Like I still remember my grandma, how, like I said, she responded to me when I went. So you know what? I ain't go back over there. And so and then like even my grandma, his mom on her before she died a week before, I didn't even want to go see her. Only because of the conversation we had about my brother changing his name. Like my one of my brothers changed his name, so he has no record of my dad's name in his name anymore. That's
Mm-hmm.
just how bad their relationship um was. But it was one of those that I've always wanted to have some connection with family. And I feel like once I let go of a lot of the things that were going within me and grew older and let God work within me, I was able to build that relationship with him. But the main thing was about communication and opening up that door of communication, accepting that this is how somebody is. They're not going to be the one calling you, texting you, checking up on you. And if it did happen, it'd be like, oh goodness. But one of the things is, I can say, he was always here for my little girl.
Mm-hmm.
I still remember my 20, even one of the big things my dad did for me, um, even prior to her even coming into the world. I always used to, I think another reason why I wasn't as close to him because I used to blame the church too. And the
Well,
reason I say,
before you go
oh,
there, wait, don't go there yet. You got a lot to unpack. So, because I just want to park for a second at communication. Um, there may be somebody who's watching who's like, okay, like I get where you're coming from. Like my parents divorced, or maybe they were together and they separated, they were never married. I have some hurts and pains just like you do. Um, but how did you have that first conversation? I don't want to skip over that because I know that it can be difficult. I remember when I had to have that first conversation with my dad, it was not easy and I was afraid. And so I don't want to sugarcoat for anybody, whether it's a dad or a mom or a sibling, like she said. Sometimes you do have to have a little courage. So since you expressed the fact that, you guys didn't have the best communication growing up, like what did you have to do? Like, what mind frame did you have to get into when you were heard about him missing your birthday to just have the courage and the boldness to express that? Because sometimes, and maybe I'm just speaking for myself, when someone else comes in the picture, it makes you question where you stand.
mm-hmm,
So even though they're the wife or the girlfriend, in the oddest way, it makes you question where you stand as a daughter. And so I know for me, even though I was really hurt about certain things, I was afraid to speak up because I was afraid if I say something that he doesn't like, if I say something that makes him too mad, he might go away.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us about, like, how did you get to the place where you had the boldness just to say, um, what you were really feeling in your heart? Because I'm sure at that time you probably weren't wide open to everybody in your heart. You probably were a little guarded. So how did you get there, and what did that process look like for you guys to even just start talking and having authentic conversation?
I think, well, I know most of it, part of it came more just with maturity for myself. And it was one of, like I said, I wrote that letter. And at one point, I didn't want to write a letter. And then it was kind of like, no, just do it and see what happens because I was hurting. And, sometimes we do something out of hurt and it can go either way, a good way or a bad way. But it was one of the, I have been told I ask a lot of questions. And that's just who I am. I like to know how things work. I like to know how things go. But at the same time, like I said, I didn't know how my dad would respond to anything. And I think I just
Mhm.
kind of got to that point of saying, you know what? I can't be afraid. I
Mm,
have to find out in order for me to heal and move, I need to ask questions. I want to understand stuff. Some things it was like, is it really worth knowing the answer to? So
mm,
when I ask those questions, I ask more so like the questions of like, would it matter why something happened in my dad's life before I was born? Like no, that wasn't important. My important issue was like, why did I have to basically feel like I lived in two separate worlds? Why did I have to do these things and not those things? And I basically at the end was like, I want to sit down and talk. And it was like I said, we didn't have that tight knit father daughter relationship, but it was like even me, like dad, I asked him something. But it was one of those like, you know what, I'm a teenager now. I've seen things. I want to know answers to stuff. And I think even my mom was part of the what ask him, ask
mm,
those. So I thought the safest way for me back then to ask questions with either parent might be like, you know what, I'm just gonna write a letter
mhm,
and I'm gonna ask the question that way. So I think I wrote a letter and I sent it in the mail, and then he called me, and then we ended up talking over the phone. That's how that first conversation went down. We just talked over the phone, and I said I wanted to ask you some questions, and he was really like okay. And I think in his heart he was like okay, she's at that. I had probably got to the age of wanting to know things and ask things. And I kind of had, like I said in the letter, say, I want to know why I have to live. So I asked him, he was like, so what you want to ask me? And so I told him, because it was before all that text messaging era back then. So it was
mhm,
just like, we had a phone conversation. I think I was just bold enough at that time. Like I was just ready to find out whatever I needed to know. It didn't matter whether it went one way or the other. It was during a time even in my life that I had dealt with, depression and anxiety and things. More so depression then, not anxiety. Anxiety came later, but it was just one of those trying to understand, wanting understanding, wanting to know. And I think it was what led partly to it was when you had enough male hurt,
mm,
you want to know like well, what is the stem of this? And when you hear people always talking about like if your daddy's not in your life and how the girl, goes out
yeah,
there trying to find love in all the wrong places. And I knew at that time I was going through, that process of this person using you, this person using you, basically people passing you around like, man, you tell her this, blah, blah, blah. And that's kind
yeah,
of how it went down. So it was just kind of like after being hurt enough, it's kind of like, well, where is this stemming from? Why am
mhm,
I doing all these things? Why am I just falling for, being naive? And that's when I had to just start asking questions. I had to sit there and say, you know what, I want to ask my dad these questions. And sometimes as a teenager, you are a little bolder when it comes to asking asking certain questions. Like you, like I don't care. You can't
ah,
tell me nothing. So I think that's what it was. Like I'm gonna ask the questions, and I just want to know. And I just had to deal with like whatever the answer that comes from it. I just had to take it for what it is. And then as time went on, like I said, I got a little bit older and then realized, like, my dad's not going to always be there like I want him to be. He's
mm,
not going to always be there like I need him to be. And I had to understand that. Most people laughed at me when
mhm,
I used to be like, I think also, too, what got me is one conversation that I was talking to some of my friends, a group of my friends at school in the library, and we were all working. Some of us were work study aid, office aides, some were library aides, and we were having a conversation. And the librarian, which mind you, My grandma used to teach at my high school. She was teaching that way before me, my dad's mom. And so my mom went there, and a lot of them grew up, and she taught them. So we were, and they knew my dad because my grandma made my daddy, when even though he might have been out of school in their school district down
Mhm.
in Montgomery, she made him be like, "No, you're going to go to school." So he went when school was out there, he still had to go to school year round, basically, and
Wow.
go to school with them. So, anyways, I was talking about him, and one of the ladies, she knew him. She was like, "You gotta let that go. You need
Mm.
to let that alone and forgive, you know." And I think that's what struck something in, because at first I was like, she don't even know. You don't know what my daddy ain't doing all like this. My daddy only doing what he got to do by law. Like, I was mad because she was
Mhm.
like, you gotta let it go. Your dad, I'm like, you just don't know. You only know my daddy from what you knew. I was upset because I was like, no, my daddy wasn't right here with me. My daddy hadn't been
Mhm.
doing anything. Y'all think, oh, he's so good and doing all
Mhm.
these things. And I'm like, no, my daddy is not. My daddy only came and got me on the weekends when he had to get me. And even then I didn't have a say in what we did. My daddy had already planned out whatever we were gonna do. So it
Mhm.
was like, no. And I was like, and I know I was probably at least junior, senior then. And then somewhere along the line, I just kind of like asked the questions, like asked what I needed to know. And then I think that's when God started working within my heart to hear her say that, and then be like, well, yeah, she might be right. Like, my daddy ain't do everything. No, he hadn't been there, but I did have somebody in my life that was like my father for me.
Yeah.
But it was just, I remember that day, I got bad. I was like, you don't know that. Like,
Well, I do want to touch on that because I think and I feel like this as an adult too, not just as like when I'm a kid, when I was a kid. I feel like we're insensitive to people. I feel
mhm,
like we either get to this point of like wisdom or knowledge or a certain point in our own life, and it's like just whatever,
mhm,
forgetting that we have hearts, like forgetting that you at whatever age dealt with whatever you dealt with. And I think we miss reaching people because we try to overly analyze instead of empathizing with people.
mhm,
You know what I mean? So even though God was able to use that as a point to kind of get you to like, okay, let me check myself a little bit. How many of us need help? How many of us are looking for someone to talk to relate to, vent to or whatever before we can even understand? We got to get it out. And we can't
mhm,
because the world is just coming off in such a way like you just need to get it together. You just need to move past it. No, I'm human. I have emotions. This is my father, this is my mother, this is my brother, this is my best friend, this is a person I dated for 20 years, whatever. And that has weight. And so whether you're someone who is going through it now and you feel like someone doesn't understand, that might not be the person for you, but there is someone. God will send someone to come alongside you, to be a real friend, to listen to you,
mhm.
to allow you to cry on their shoulder. And God himself is there for you if you allow him in. And then one other thing I wanted to touch on, because I had to, you ask my mom, I could not talk to my mama. She will, yes. I just wasn't the greatest. That's what we had to do. Listen, if you want reconciliation, if you want to be heard, sometimes we are too emotional on both sides of the gate to have
Mhm.
a literal conversation, because what happens is we start at point A, then we go back to 2013, then we going back to 1980, now we coming back to 2020 because that happened, and nothing gets solved, nothing gets
Yep.
answered, nothing gets solved. You leave angrier than you came, you're more bitter than you started, and now it's even harder to reconcile because all you guys did was throw extra dirt on the fire, extra fuel on the fire. So, that's something my mom started with me. I didn't start it. She started it with me because I was 0 to 100 real quick. Like, you got about 2 words and I'm going off. She would leave a notebook at my door in the morning so that I could read what she had to say. And as a writer, I could respond. So that's the clearest answer you'll get from me. And I would leave it, and it turned from that being just how we would reconcile a situation to sometimes she would leave me crosswords that she would make up, that would say love and things like that. So where I could not understand her, where I wasn't really receiving love from her, being able to hear without the extra clutter, just process what was on that paper, and then have the freedom to just say what I needed to say without interference. Because sometimes with parents, it's like, no, let me talk. You shut up.
Mhm.
I'm the parent. And then now we're extra angry. It gave us space to say and really digest. So whether you're an adult or, if you're a teenager or a kid and you feel like you're having a hard time communicating, feel free to go outside the box. Like, send a text message. I know we're not in the notes and the letters age anymore. Send a text message, or send a Microsoft Word document where you're just saying how you feel, and then give that person time to respond the same way, and see how those things, will change your communication. Or maybe it's that we can't have a conversation in a house because that's where we always fight. So maybe you guys need to take a walk. Let's take a walk. A walk will help,
Mhm.
the endorphins and all of that. It'll help you decompress a little bit. And then maybe we can have a conversation. So try those things, because the truth is, at the core of it, even from what we can hear from Jarkeshia's conversation, at the core, there is love. It's just
Mhm.
getting from underneath the mounds of yuck, a misunderstanding, miscommunication, hurt, to get to that place where there can be reconciliation. So I thank you for sharing that, because I don't think we think enough about other things. We do things, insanity, we do things, they don't work, and we just keep doing them, hoping that it
Mhm.
works instead of trying other things. And I think that is a really, really, really good thing.
Yeah,
Um,
because like you said, it is about, there is love. Your parents love you. Don't get me wrong. They don't hate you. They love you. They may not know how to show it, because you have
yeah.
to think about how they were showed love too. Not saying their parents didn't love them, but everybody shows love in different ways. And then you have to also think about the generation they were brought up in. That's one
Mhm.
thing I'm seeing more and more. You got to think like men back then, they have to be the strong man. You can't show these emotions. You can't, do all these things. So you never know what your parents themselves are still dealing with that makes them not, basically, I say, love you in the way that you want to be loved.
Mhm. That's good.
Yeah.
Or need to be loved, because we only know how to do what we've experienced or been taught.
Mm-hmm.
So if the only way I know love, just as an example, is to buy something, that might not be your love language, but that's all I know. So
Yeah.
I'm buying you gifts, and you're like, I want your time. And I'm like, haven't I done enough for you? All this money I spent, you're like, I don't care nothing about that. I just want you to sit, watch a movie. So to your point, at some point, somebody has to be the person who changes everything. Someone has to be the one to say, it stops with me. Even if it's not intentional that we were this way in our bloodline, knowing how I feel, knowing how it's affected me, I want something different for my family. And I believe that you're doing that the way that I hear you talking about communication in your encouragement podcast. Like, obviously, you are that catalyst for your family. I would like to pivot to your relationship with God. Um, I'm a firm believer. Y'all know I'm a God's girl. I'm a daddy's girl with God first now. Um, but I'm a firm believer you cannot do one without the other. It's very, very hard to reconcile with people if you don't have the spirit of God in you. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be the mature Christian that's been in church for 25 years and you have, this, the cover for your skirt. I'm not saying that.
Mm-hmm.
But the only way that we can truly love is to experience it first, is to receive it first. So talk to us about your relationship with God and how that started. Did, that kind of non-close relationship with your dad affect your relationship with God? And then as you grew with God, how did that affect in the reverse where it got better?
Well, like I said, my dad became a minister when I was like, I guess 4 or 5, somewhere between that age range. So I've always grown up and been in the church, but it was more like most of us, we go to church because your mom and daddy tell you you got to go to church. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
but I did go to private school back in like first and second grade, and I loved it. I was
Okay.
like, ooh, we used to play. I told somebody about this recently. We used to play something called Swords Up. So, your Bible's considered your sword. So we would
Okay.
have the Bible in your hand, and like the teacher would call out a scripture. and you had to go find it. And whoever found it first basically won. But it helped us one to know the books of the Bible. It helped us to know where to find, the books in the Bible, where to find things. So it was a fun way to remember, books of the Bible. And of course, you have your songs and stuff. You'll be singing about Genesis, Exodus,
Mhm.
So I've always had that, relationship with him, but I had that foundation that even started off that young and like first and second grade. But as you get a little older, you're kind of like, I just gotta go to church because they making me go to church, or I'm not really understanding what they're talking about. And then depends
Mhm.
on who the teacher, and then where you're going. But I love church. I loved going to church from probably like up until I got ready to my mom moved back home. I used to love going because one, I was in the well, no, until she got divorced from my old stepfather. I used to really like going to church because I was in the choir. I got to sing in the choir, and I just loved it because we'd be bumping, we'd be rocking, and they would have like family events, and it was just church was fun. It maybe I didn't understand exactly what I was singing and saying, but I do
Mhm.
have those memories from then. So it was God working me in a different way, not saying no knowing him so much, but of course we said our grace and you said your prayers at night. But it wasn't like I'm reading the Bible all the time, but I had fun
Mhm.
memories of that even growing up, still even in church in the country with my grandma and them, I still had that. But it was like the older you got, you kind of were like, he just talking and talking. I don't know what this man talking about. The preacher preaching. I'm like, what you talking about? Like, I don't even stand that. And then if they talk for too, I mean, some people long winded. So you kind of be like, oh my gosh, you done lost me. And then it's not something relatable. And then we sitting
Mhm.
there singing like singing them hymnals, and you're like, and it's like, oh my goodness, like I need something with something, going with it. And so it was more like one of those just having to go to church to have to go. But the more you like, we had to be involved. Like one of the Sunday school classes, we had to like memorize, know your lesson. You had to have read your Sunday school lesson because she might ask you to say something about it, and you'd be like, oh,
Mhm.
I didn't read it. And you would get fussed at. And some people, of course, you like going because you get a treat or something. Like my grandma was the lady that had all the candy. She made everybody. She would give you a full size Snicker bar and all of that for so it was just kind of different, and I think it depends on the different pastors and what you've grown up in,
Mhm.
because we were first, like, I grew up in a missionary Baptist church, and that's when I really was, we were really getting into it. Like they had soul food Sunday one Sunday where people were bringing like real stroke soul food. They had chitlins and everything. And I was like, ooh, that's the first time I ever tried and the last time. I'm like, I don't want that nasty stuff. If you eat them, I'm sorry, but I did not want those. But I think God started really building because I did start turning away a little bit more, and it kind of just made it a habit. The older I got, like, yeah, I'm going to church because I got to go to church. And I think, like I said, with my granddaddy dying, I looked at things a little bit differently because it was like he did something within me to say, you know what, I got to stop living like I'm living and stop doing what I'm
Mhm.
doing. I got to do better. And so that's when the first round, I guess to say, started. And then somewhere up in there, I started backsliding and going back into the world. And it wasn't until I got out of college and, moved away. And then it was like, you know what, I want to have a closer relationship with God. I really want to do right. I want to do better. I don't want to keep, living in this life. Cause it was like we when you're out there in the world, yes, it's nice, things come quickly, but at the same
Mhm.
time, you end up with a lot of hurt and a lot of
Mhm.
pain. And what actually really what took off, I went to it goes back to my dad and my relationship. I had moved, finished college. My brother and I had lived with my mom. We moved out. We got our own apartment together, and then I had to move back home because my brother and I kind of had fell out for a moment. And I wanted to still go to church, but I didn't want to go to church close to home because, like I told you, sitting there, somebody talk along, we drink, singing like hymnals, it's just too slow. And so I decided that I would drive all the way to Wetumpka. Because what I used to love to do is for my dad, this just shows you how much our relationship had changed. I always would pop up and surprise him on Pastor's Appreciation Day. He would never know I was coming. Cause I love to be like, okay, I'm gonna come. And he never knew, wouldn't expect me. If I knew what his church was, I always popped up, or they called me and be like, we want his kids or something. But he never knew. Like
Mhm.
I think one year I told my stepmom, she let me know when it was gonna be in the house. She would always, one thing I can say, she's always been the one trying to make us be closer. My siblings and I be closer to our dad. She's always been the one trying to push that. And we always been like, well, he could come talk to us. But I will give her
Mhm.
her credit. She was the one, so she'll send me a text message and be like, okay, Pastor's anniversary is gonna appreciation gonna be on this day. We want you to come. Okay, I'll be there. And I said I try to be there, so I would go to like surprise him on his pastor appreciation. He'll look up and be standing in the pulpit, look up, and I'm sitting out there in the audience, and he'll call me out or something like that because I was surprised. And that's what I think also kind of started more of our relationship
Mm-hmm.
being closer too. But it was one of those that there was that God did more of a work within me to be able to accept things as they are during that. And like I said later, I enjoyed going to his one of his churches so much that I joined it.
Wow.
And that was the one day I've ever seen my daddy boohoo like a baby. Like I really enjoyed it, and I used to drive a whole hour from where my mom lived in the country to my dad's church,
Mm-hmm.
and I got involved in the choir. I was teaching Sunday school. But I remember that one Sunday I was like, Mom, I'm gonna join my dad at church. And I didn't tell him, he knew nothing about it. So when they had extended the invitation, I came up there, my daddy was just like bawling on me. He was like, Lord, I know I'm doing something right when my kids want to come and follow me. Now, mind you, growing up, I never thought I'd be sitting there, listening to my dad preach. My mom
Mm-hmm.
used to even say like she could never see herself really listening to him preach. But when she started listening to him, it was like, he's really a changed man. He had to have a change within him too. So God did a work not only in him, God did a work within me, got me more involved in church. And then when I moved away and started college, I did start going to a church. It was different because it's a non-denomination and it's mixed church. And I was like, one of my friends that also her grandma and my grandma went to the little country church down, and we were both members there. And she told me like, it's a church you can go to, but I'm gonna let you know now it's a little different. And I was like, okay. So at first it was kind of like, I don't know about all of this. But it was so many different. Like they had the 21 days. I started going regularly because it was like 5 minutes from my house, and they started doing like the one year they did the 21 days of prayer and fasting. And I
Mm-hmm.
hadn't really ever just, truly fasted or done any of that. And I remember one day we were leaving from the prayer on, I think a Saturday, the guy I was dating myself, and I just broke down crying. And I was like, what is this? He was like, the Holy Spirit just hit you.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh my goodness, because it was just like I was filled with so much joy, and God really worked on me going to that church because I finally got to that point where I'm the one now doing like this, raising my hands, and and I'm boohooing during songs and really didn't know. So it was just my relationship. That church really helped my relationship grow closer to Him, and what really helped even more was when I moved away and I had started working after I had finished my master's, and it was that they had another campus there where they have what we call the Freedom Group. And one of the things he told us, he had said, join the Freedom Group, go all in. And that was one of the things I did do. That was
Mm-hmm.
really made my relationship with God grow a whole lot closer because in that Freedom Group, it basically is like you're an onion. They peel back one layer at a time. And
Girl.
so, and when they get to the end, you're like, I went and got water baptized because they always have a conference at the end of that that small group. After that 13 weeks, they always have this big huge freedom conference. And that night, it was a Friday and a Saturday. That Friday night, I felt God prompting me to go ahead and get baptized. Go ahead and do it. And so I was like, I knew the guy I was dating at the time. Both we had said we were going. He had already been water baptized, but we had said we were going to do it for our the night before our wedding or whatever. And I said, I told him, "You gonna be okay with this?" He was like, "Well, I can't argue with the Holy Spirit," even though later he really wasn't okay with it. I was
But you can't argue with the Holy Spirit.
yeah, but I never forget that day. I let go of so many things because during that conference, you pray so much, and people are
Mm-hmm.
praying over you, and you come to them and you just open up and tell them what you're praying about, and they pray for you. Like they'll have something like if you've been something for abuse, something for
Mm-hmm.
some other kind of unforgiveness, and you just leave it all there. You feel like you floating on cloud nine when you leave. Like I still have a visual of going down in the water and looking at that ceiling in that building when I came up out of the water. And I remember feeling light as a feather. I had let everything go. I'm like, nothing's gonna ruin this night, even though dude did get mad. But I was like, there ain't nothing but the devil trying to take this away from me. What I
Mm-hmm.
already got going on, I'm not gonna worry about that. And ever since then, my relationship with God has been different. When I let all that go and really let Him come in and work on me, and that's allowed me to be able to when somebody's abusing me and verbally, not physically, we ain't doing that. But if somebody's, verbally, you know, being abusive to me, I'm able to not react the way that they want me to react.
Yeah.
And then when people see that you don't react that way, they will talk about you that too because you didn't respond that way. But it's made it easier to forgive because, like I said, it opened my eyes up to say, you know what, forgiveness is not for that other person.
Come
Forgiveness is
on.
for me. That I needed to be able to heal and be able to let things go and be able to walk forward and move forward. Because as long as you're holding on to it, the less God can really do with you. You got too
Mm,
much bitterness and anger, and that's hurting your body when you're holding
mhm.
on to these things. And then it's also like, what is it good is it gonna be me if you snap on me and I snap on you? Like you said earlier, that don't solve the problem. We still fussing. We not gonna
Mhm.
have a decent conversation. One of the things they like, you have to stop saying you in a conversation, or and pointing the finger, and then also
Mhm.
taking responsibility for what you've done too. So that comes all with, I guess, say just your walk and maturity and things that God is doing within you. When you really say, okay, God, I gotta forgive. You forgave me, so I
Yeah.
gotta forgive them too.
Listen, y'all. I listen. I am an advocate for freedom. I am an advocate for freedom. I have done it twice under two different leaderships. There is something
Mhm.
really special about when you meet God and he's dealing with a room full of other people, but he is single focused on you.
Mhm.
When, like, in a way that a parent could never do, in a way that a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a wife, or a husband could never do. It's just you and him, and he's not afraid of the heaviness of what you're feeling. He's not intimidated by your tears. He's not intimidated by your anger. He already knows it's there. And if you could just get to a point where you release that in prayer, like she was saying, they go through a lot of different stuff. A lot, but it's needed. And when you're honest, that's the part. If you can just be honest with him, it changes everything. The word says that he gives you beauty for ashes, he gives you joy for mourning, he gives you the garment of praise for the spirit of despair. So there's got to be an exchange in there. But if you can exchange with God, then it will empower you to exchange with other people. Like Jarkesha said, I'm sitting at this, altar recognizing, like, I'm out the pocket and God forgave me. Who am I not to turn around? And it's not that it's easy all
Mm-mm.
the time, but then you have a connection with the perfect God who can empower you to do what you can't do on your own. And that's the importance of that relationship, is just the authenticity. So for anybody who feels like, I got to know the right song, I got to know how to pray, no.
Mm-mm.
He said in spirit and in truth. And so whatever that truth is, I'm angry with this person right now because they hurt me. That's your truth. I know your word says to forgive, but I need help because I'm hurting. So you're going to have to empower me, God, to see beyond my pain. You're going to have to empower me, God, to see this from a kingdom perspective. Jesus, help me to forgive as you forgave us. Whatever that looks like. How do I talk to this person? Do I need to take a break? But it comes from having dialogue, authentic dialogue about what's going on. I feel like we forget God is a doctor. You don't
Mhm.
go to the doctor and say, "Oh, I got a minor headache," if you're bleeding out your side. You say, "I'm bleeding. It's hurting. I feel lightheaded. I'm having a heart. I'm getting you're going to lay out everything that's wrong so that the doctor can correctly diagnose you so that you can get healed." And so if you can be brave enough, if we can be brave enough to do that with him over and over, because life is imperfect and somebody's always going to disappoint us. Somebody is
Mhm.
always going to create some type of hurt, regardless of the magnitude. But if we can learn to have that dialogue with God, knowing that He loves us and that He will always be there for us and guide us, it will help the other relationships. So that's, again, another tool. I know a lot of churches do offer it, especially with small groups. If you can take advantage, regardless of the relationship, take advantage of that.
Mhm.
Love yourself enough to get whole. It's not about anybody else, like Jarkesha said. It's about you. Love
Mhm.
yourself enough to get whole. And when you feel that lightness, you never want to go back.
Nope.
I know that for me. So when I start feeling heavy or I feel like my chest is starting to, I'm like, oh, I don't like that. Like, okay, Holy Spirit, we're gonna have to. I don't know what it is. I don't know who I'm mad at.
We're gonna have to work on it.
Yes, because I don't. I like being joyful. I like being happy. I like having a capacity to love and to experience happiness. But you can't have both. You can't hold trash and think you're gonna have space for treasure. So thank you for sharing that tool. That man, that is so I will forever be an advocate for that. It is so good. Deliverance is necessary for your
And like
soul.
they said, there's nothing wrong with you have to go through it more than once. I've considered doing it all over again
Yeah,
because
boo.
right now we're in a pandemic, and I'm not trying to be in a crowded room with a whole bunch of people. I said, but I would, tell anybody like it's not a one and done all the time. And like they say, anything that's going on with you and your work with God is always a continual process. It's not a, oh, I do it as one and done kind of situation. You're always every day fighting
Mm,
your mind, all these things are always coming at you and to you. So it's not like she said, it's not like this easy thing. But the more you're spiritually mature, the more certain things will not bother you as they used to do. The more you'll stop doing certain things that you used to do,
mhm.
the more you'll realize I can't be around that person. You too much. You taking too much in my energy. So
Come
I'm gonna
on.
love you from a distance. So it's one of those things like people will recognize who you are, seeing what you're doing, and they'll be like, you know what, she ain't gonna fight anyway, so I'm not gonna come, at her. They'll come at you differently. And I'm not
Mhm,
saying it's an easy thing because the enemy is always coming at us, but it's one of those things that you do find more and more. You learn more and more with the things you're learning, with the things you're releasing, what you're letting go. And you kind of learn what energy you rather be in. Do you want to be in that fight or flight all the time? Do you want to be in that,
mhm.
I'm gonna jump you, you say whatever. It's one of those you have a level of peace that you like she said, you don't want to lose it. And the enemy
Mm-mm.
comes, like I said, he came the next day. And it was like, really? And it was like, but they even tell you that once you finish it, he comes even harder. And that's one of the things I've always learned, that they say that if the devil is not trying to fight you, you may be walking with him.
Come on.
So if he's not throwing things at you or coming at you, then he's probably right next to you, and you walking and doing exactly what he wants you to do. But the more you're doing things for God, the harder he's gonna come at you. He's gonna try to keep you from doing everything. The doubt's gonna be there, the frustration's gonna be there. You're
Mhm.
gonna have those high and low seasons, but just always remember that God is always there too, and God has given us all the tools that we need to make it in this life.
Girl, you about to take me in a whole another direction. I'm gonna stay focused. Um, woo, I, I love healing. Praise the Lord for healing. Um, so as we know that your dad's no longer with us, but we've seen just the kind of progression. Where were you guys when he passed away? Were you guys in a good space, and what was that like for you?
Yeah, we were in a very good space, very very good space. I'm at that point, y'all. If I could have my dad back here again, I would love him to be here. I still have our last text message conversation. I'm one of them people, like I have three people that are gone that were very close to me.
Hmm.
Like my grandma, I still have a voicemail that my grandma left me, and she's been dead 4 years now. I still have the last text conversation I had with my guy best friend that passed away, and he's been gone 4 years now. So now I have the conversation from my dad, and I don't want to lose that because we had gotten better. I was checking up on him. Like I told y'all, my dad basically, I guess that he made things matter when it needed to matter, meaning like choosing me over the church before. And that was
Hmm.
in itself was something big, because most of the time they laugh when I used to be like, I had to get on my dad's calendar a year in advance. I'm like, no, I'm so
Hmm.
serious, because he was a regular with the church, but they got this conference, they got that coming on, this going, he's speaking here.
Yeah.
And I used to be like, Dad, what weekend you got free so we can come visit? And Christmas was his season and his holiday. So we would kind of like, try to be around for Christmas. So because everybody loved his coffee punch. and I couldn't drink it because I'm lactose intolerant because it had ice cream and whole milk and all that. And I'm like, and
Girl.
they told it up. It had coffee in it. They
Yeah.
loved his punch, and we would just we love to be silly and have a good time, you know. But my dad, when I had my daughter, my dad was there. He never missed a birthday. My dad held on to Christmas gifts for a whole year. I think before COVID happened or somewhere right after I had her, they had Christmas gifts that year. You know, he was there for her birthdays. He didn't, I guess whatever he had on his schedule, it was like whatever. I'm gonna see my grandma. That was his butterbean. I have
Oh.
pictures of them together. So just to see like him, I guess, seeing what mattered a little bit more. Now, mind you, my dad was one of those ones that when COVID still here, but even in the heat of it, he didn't close the church. He was kind of like, well, if the church ain't essential, then we all got a problem. So he was still having church even during that. And no, you know, of course, with COVID happening, it was kind of like, I don't know about y'all coming and being all up on us, but they did come visit us one time. And the last time my dad came here, never would have known that was the last time.
Mm.
He was only here for like 5-10 minutes. But I still remember them surprising me after I had her. I was nursing. We wouldn't expect nobody to come to the house, and I'm sitting there trying to cover up as best I can. Like, and he over, and then mind you, he decides to sit in the chair directly across, and I'm like, oh goodness. But just to see like him being there for her, we still have things he's giving her. We have
Mm.
my dad and them gave us an Instapot. I'm like, we can't never get rid of the Instapot. Even if it break, we had to keep it because it's to me it's like a keepsake. I got this little fountain that I ain't never used that they gave us. So it's just one of those things like I would love to still be able to call him. I just had my first birthday without him,
Mm.
and that was hard because it was like I knew it was coming. And it was like it's gonna be harder because of the fact our birthdays are so close. Even people didn't realize our birthdays were that close
Yeah.
together. But one of the things I do understand, I look back at pictures and I remember the good times. I remember the fun times. I mean, y'all, we love to have fun. We silly. Like we can all sing or dance. I mean, sing or either play an instrument or do both. But we got that from him, our love of music. So it's just taking that time not to focus so much upon the bad times,
Yeah.
focus upon the good times you have. Because one thing I can tell y'all, 2020 and even still now, it was hard. It's still, you know, hard because, you know, dealing with losing my dad 2 weeks prior to Christmas. And like I told
Mm.
you, Christmas was his holiday. And then
Yeah.
on top of that, my husband had a stroke last year. So a lot of us went through a lot of things. A lot of us lost people. One thing I can say out through it all is that cherish your loved ones because time is short and time is not guaranteed to any of us. You know, you somebody's here one day and gone the next. So take time, no matter what the relationship is like. If you really want to have a relationship with that person, if you really are hurting, take the time to either one get therapy to get that, find your voice, so that when you go talk to that person, you won't go full of all this anger and rage, and that you can
Yeah.
have a decent conversation, even if they don't respond the same way. Because I can tell you, therapy has worked for me. Not only did I have issues with my dad, I've also had issues with my mom. And I can tell you, therapy has been the thing that has helped me to be able to have that opportunity to open up, to release whatever that you're feeling and what you're going through. So that, and also journaling. Journaling helps too. Write down what you're feeling, get that out. Because the more we have it in us, the more it consumes us and takes over us. And then we lash out on the other people who don't deserve it. So
Mhm.
I guarantee tell you, anybody cherish your loved ones. I'm not gonna lie, some people you just gonna have to really learn to accept them for who they are. This is who they are, this is who you are, because we can't control who other people are. That's how they're made and that's how we're made, but we can control how we respond and how we react. And some people you have to like love from a distance. That's just being honest.
I love that. And I think it's arrogant. We don't know. It's like a subconscious arrogance that we just think we have time.
Hmm.
Because if we really looked at it like you said, I think a lot of us learned that last year and this year with COVID. COVID wasn't, just taking people who were like 90 and above. There were some teenagers, there were some 20-year-olds, 30, 40. It was
Hmm.
every bracket. So, when those moments come and you're sitting there at a funeral, or all the I woulda, shoulda, couldas come. But now it's too late. It's too late. But you had time. God is
Hmm.
gracious enough that He provides a space and opportunity. We have to be willing to take it. And one of the things that you said was you got to a point where you no longer waited for Him. And I think that's where we get stuck, especially with parents. We're like, you're the parent, you should do that, but you do have to recognize who's in front of you. So if they're not going to do it, how much do you need the wholeness? How much do you need the healing? How much do you want to be free of it? That's got to be your driving factor. Not that they came and they apologized and they said whatever you wanted them to say, but your own self-care, your own self-help, health. And then from there, like you said, recognizing this isn't a fairy tale. The person that we thought our father should have been at 3, at 16, 17, that's not who they were. And so I either have an option to engage who's in front of me or to keep having friction with someone who never existed. That's on us to decide what we're going to do. And I think, again, no matter what age this is, because as you guys can see, it's a building pattern. A lot of what we're dealing with today are things that were built on yesterday. And so you have to decide whether it's someone you're dating, a good friend, whatever. This is who's in front of me. This is who they are. This is raw, like no sugarcoat. This is who it is. Do I care enough to repair, reconcile, or not? And regardless of whether I do or not, we need to forgive so that we can have the healing, so that we can be free and move forward into the things that God has for us. So I think that's really critical, to not take time for granted. I have a grandma who passed away suddenly. We didn't have a bad relationship, but she was, maybe early 60s. She felt just never she just never came out the hospital. She was getting better and she just like that. And so I have regrets, not because we were at odds, but because I never had a final conversation with her. I was not able to visit her in there. I wasn't able to tell her that, she was one of my favorites or that I love coming over her house. So it doesn't even have to be bad. You just can't take that time for granted because you just don't know. Somebody could move away and you just never see them again. You just don't know. And so we have to really pull up the muck, pull up the weeds of everything that we're feeling and thinking and get to the root. And at the root, you love this person, they love you. Do we have the strength? Do we have the courage? Do we have God to give us the spiritual part that we need to reconcile, to forgive, and to move on, so that when these moments happen and people pass away, I'm not happy that he passed away for you, but what I am happy about is that you miss him, that there's love there, that there's peace in your heart because you did something that a lot of people don't have the courage to do. And so your memories of him are more great when you talk to your daughter, as she gets older. It's not going to be the yuck. You're even going to honor him with her. All she really know about him is how much you love him. And that comes from that healing. So that's where we should all ascribe to be, where we can get to the point where we allow the beauty to be beautiful and to the love to be what it's supposed to be. And God was great enough in your situation where what he wasn't to you when you were a little girl, he was to your baby girl. So you might not have experienced it as a little kid, but you got to watch it. And now that's a memory that you'll forever have. So I love that. Y'all, I love that. You got to get free. I promise you. We all are containers and we all have a max capacity. And I think so many of us miss out on the beauty of life because we're so full of just the negative stuff of hurt and pain. And the only people who can empty it out is us. So I just want to challenge you guys, even as we go into this holiday season, decide before 2022. How do you want to live? Who do you want to be? What do you want to be full of? And go after that thing. Know that if it's in line with God, he's going to meet you there. He wants you healthy. He wants you whole. He wants you free. He wants you full of love and joy. And so he's going to meet you there. It might be a little hard, but he's going to meet you there. Before we go, Jarkeshia, I would love if you just have some encouraging words, if you have any more tips for the people who now might feel a little bit of hope and they're like, okay, I can try this. She did it. It was successful. Like, I identify, what would you say to the people just so that they can take these tools or this hope to really tackle their relationships?
One of the things that I do remember saying after my dad passed is that I am thankful that I reconciled our relationship. I tell anybody reconciliation is important, not only for you, but for you to have that peace in the end. Like if somebody were to suddenly die, would you be like, okay, well, at least I reconciled our relationship?
Mhm.
Or would it be if somebody suddenly died and you're still mad at them and you regret and say, I wish I had a, I wish I could have talked to them. I wish I could have said that because once they're gone, they're gone. You can't, we can't bring them back, you know. But one of the things is that I say, life is short. Cherish each time that you have. Yes, things are going to get tough. And I'm not saying it's easy because I still have my moments of, highs and lows. We're going to have highs and lows, but we have to remember that, you know what? Life is short. Cherish your loved ones because time is short. You always think I got tomorrow to do this and I got tomorrow to do that. But not only that, one of the things that I'm working more on is, and it goes with Crystal says, taking care of self. You have to make sure that you're okay. You can't worry so much about how somebody's going to respond to you, how they're going to react, and what they're going to do. Because as I learned even through therapy, I have no control over that. I don't have
Mm,
control of their actions. I can only control my own actions. So you have to stop and think, is there anybody out there that you need to one forgive? And you can extend the forgiveness to them, or you can and give grace because God has given us grace. But you have to decide and know in your heart, this is what I'm really going to do, and you're going to be okay with whatever the outcome is. If they're receptive to it, good. If they're not, then you did your part, and that's all you can
mhm,
worry about. You can't worry about the rest of it and what comes behind it because God is going to be thrilled with you because you took that step to even do that. No, it may not be easy. Yes, it may be hurtful. Yes, you may still have some pain. Like I tell anybody, talk to somebody, find a therapy, find a
mhm,
therapist, I'm sorry, find a coach, find somebody you could confide in that you could say, okay, this is how I'm feeling. If you need to take time and journal, find some devotions. There are many different devotions out there, like even on emotions and how to handle hard times and difficult
mhm,
relationships. But, always find somebody that you can open up to and freely talk to. God is always there, but God has also placed these other people here to help you
mhm,
as well. So let somebody help you. Don't be afraid. Don't let us be like one of the things I have learned through this experience is don't let us be like the past generation of people that says what's done in this house
mm,
stays in this house. What happens here stays here because we are the product of those people
yeah.
that have grown up in that era that they don't talk about their feelings, that they lash out, that they feel certain ways because they were told that you don't go spreading your business. I'm not saying put all your laundry out there, but be open to share a story because you never know how your story is going to help somebody else. And that's one of the things I could say that I'm seeing more of. We're opening up and sharing our testimonies because that's what God gave us to us for, is to share with one another so that we can help one another get through those tough seasons that we're going through.
I love it. Y'all, thank you so much for joining us today. I definitely want you to share whatever handles, whatever programs, and hopefully when she puts out the summit, guys, I am going to share that so that we can definitely support our sister queen. But tell the people where they can follow and connect with you.
So you can, I have two pages on Instagram. If you're just more so interested in the podcast, it's called Encouragement Forward, and that's the name of it, the handle of on Instagram for it. And also you can listen to it on any other podcast platforms. And then also I'm on Rays of Sunshine Jam on Instagram, and both of those are also on Facebook. So if you look up Encouragement Forward, and if you ever listen to one of the episodes, I have it all linked in at the bottom of the podcast show notes. And my website is raysofsunshinejam.com. And you can always email me at sunshine at raysofsunshinejam.com. And I'm here. I'll talk. I'll pray. Y'all, I'm just who I am. I'm a friendly person. I'm not going to bite nobody or nothing like that. I'm silly at times. I'll say something crazy and off the wall. So I'm just letting you, and like I welcome, like I said, anybody that wants to, if you need prayer, you want to talk, or, just need some encouragement, I'm right here for you.
I love it. Well,
And
thank you.
thank you.
Oh, girl. Thank you. Thank you. I Today was so good. We have similar stories. My parents divorced and all that. So when I first talked to my sister, I was like, somebody gets it. Like, oh, somebody gets it. And I just love that we can come together and show people, my dad's still living. We have a good relationship. It's possible. Don't let the world tell you otherwise. It is possible. You just have to go with God and do the work. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and trusting us with your story. I really hope that it has blessed people, and we will see you next time, guys. Bye. Hey everyone, I hope that you guys enjoyed today's session with Jarkesha. This session, as you guys know, is like super close to my heart because it's how God really came and found me. He came at me as father in a time where my relationship with my father wasn't the greatest, and he introduced me to a greater version of what a father was. And so I just want to encourage all of you guys that whether it's your mom or whether it's your father, maybe it's a grandparent or a godparent, someone who was in that nurturing position and there's some hurts and pains, God can heal, he can restore it, and he can make it better. We just have to be willing to do the work with him first. We have to be willing to allow him to love us, to deal with our yuck so that we can go and have those tough conversations and be bold and brave enough to love again. So I hope that you guys were encouraged by her story and her testimony. Please definitely go check her out so that you can connect and get some more gems and some more just hope from her story. I loved it. It was amazing. Remember, use your practical tools. So if you need to journal, please journal. If there is a freedom program somewhere near you, please take advantage of it. Small groups are excellent and coaches are awesome. So please never feel like you are in this life alone. God always makes sure that he puts kingdom partners, that he puts kingdom relationships around you to make sure that you're growing and becoming the men and women that God has called us to be. So be encouraged. And as always, make sure that you connect with friends and mentors who can pray for and with you. Read your word. It is your daily bread. Make sure you fast and pray so that you can strengthen your inner man, and always, always, always look forward in expectation to what God is going to do, because he's a good father and he loves you and wants the best for you. Be encouraged. Until next time, we'll see you later, guys. Bye.